Hello, YouTube. I am Adam Noyce of AN Productions, and joining me is the director of the Godzilla fan film, claymation fan film, Godzilla X Bagan, the unknown 837, aka Patrick Galvan. Say hi, Pat.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Hopefully they're going good. And what have we got in store for you to talk about today?
Not what you're used to. Probably not what you're used to seeing from either of us.
Right. And you know, as a lot of people know, I'm a lover of epics. I know that you have a fancy of epics as well, judging by what we've talked about before off recording.
Yeah.
And this was an epic. It's listed as an epic. I don't know if I want to call it an epic, but since it's listed as an epic, we might as well just put it into that category.
It exists in the same genre as a number of epic. Let's put it like that. Yeah.
Right. And I have been wanting to see this movie ever since. Well, let's face it. This is the 300 Spartans, made in 1962. That's what we're going to be talking about, and we might as well just kind of talk about the thing that's going to be looming over this entire review. Yes, this is the movie that inspired Frank Miller to write his graphic novel 300 and Zack Snyder's movie 300. Now, Patrick, you've seen 300, correct?
I have, yes. I've not read the work that preceded it, but I have seen the film.
I have read the graphic novel, and I have just about the same opinion on that as I do as the film. But what were your thoughts of the film, anyways?
The film, I would say this. It's so ridiculously over the top in terms of its style and its content that it actually, for me personally, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was totally ridiculous and absurd. And there was no attempt at all to make it even remotely like, how things would have been for the real 300 Spartans. But as a stylistic action picture, I thought it was a lot of good, charming fun. It was not a great masterpiece in my opinion, but it was enjoyable to see.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have that opinion. I really don't like it.
Oh yeah?
It's just not my kind of movie. And,
well, I can understand that.
And neither is the graphic novel, which is funny though because I love Watchmen. But I guess to each their own. It just depends on your personal preferences on things. But anyways, just to drive this home again, this was the film that inspired Frank Miller directly. In fact, several lines he stole from this movie, such as the one where he goes, "Our arrows will blot out the sun," and Leonidas goes, "Then we'll fight in the shade."
Yeah. For the record, they did not steal the line, "This is Sparta." I'm just putting that out there.
No,
they did not steal that
line.
line.
Though I was honestly expecting it somewhere. I wasn't expecting it to be as over the top, but I was expecting it. So I was a little let down that wasn't there. But is this really an epic? I have to ask that, because it is, according to my Netflix list. Yes, it is considered an epic. It's on the epics list, and I typed it up on IMDb, and it's listed as an epic there as well. So I guess in the physical term, it's considered an epic, but is it really? Because it's not really shot like an epic.
No, and it doesn't really have the same kind of grand scale or story or narrative technique that you'd expect from an epic. And like I said, I think it more exists in the genre that you would classify an epic as, and it's kind of gotten the title epic from, shall we say, genre nepotism, if you will. It exists in that kind of genre, but I wouldn't really call it one myself.
Right. In fact, I actually I felt like I was watching a Ray Harryhausen fantasy movie. In fact, this reminded me ridiculously of Jason and the Argonauts. I was watching, I was like, it's shot the same way. Mm-hmm. The acting is the same way. The music's even similar.
It's got a Ray Harryhausen, regular Lawrence Naismith is in it as well.
Yes.
Who was the shipbuilder from Jason and the Argonauts and the professor in Valley of Gwangi. Yeah, so
I was like, damn it, I wish he had a bigger role.
Yeah, same here. I was kind of let down by that part too.
But it's so funny because the director was a cinematographer. He worked with Alfred Hitchcock, most notably because he got nominated for an Academy Award from this movie. But
Rudolph Mattei.
Foreign Correspondent. He did the cinematography on that, which I think was beautifully shot. So a part of me was like, then why doesn't this look? You'd think that somebody that had that kind of record would make something look a lot great, especially in the fact that they had 5,000 Greek soldiers.
Yeah.
Who were pulled off duty to shoot this movie. I'm like, you think that they would utilize that? I mean, towards the end of the film, there are a few shots where you do see thousands in one shot.
Yeah.
But
and one thing,
it's a lot of these shots are really kind of close up or like medium shots.
Yeah, one thing I noticed was in the scenes where you have the 300 Spartans marching, there really isn't any shots to really convey how massive their army is. In fact, in sometimes it looks like it's more like a group of like 50 guys as opposed to 300 because it's not really.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not photographed in a way to really give you a sense of scale or just how many soldiers there are, or even how big the landscape they're traveling upon is. It's not handled in a way that I think would really justify this kind of film.
Me neither. Yeah, I mean, this was shot, it reminded me a lot of, there was a movie made in 1964 that is on my top 10 favorite films. I mean, it's just phenomenal, called Zulu. And Zulu was directed by Kai Anfield, who directed Mysterious Island, for any of you who are interested. Anyways, but he directed Zulu. And that movie was shot very much like this, but here's the difference. Zulu was not trying to be an epic.
Yeah.
This movie is clearly trying to be an epic, and it had a very big budget. This film had a $9 million budget, which was $3 million more than the epic that was going to be released the year after, El Cid. And El Cid was huge. It looked huge.
Yeah, by far.
Hell, King of Kings was being released. Was released a year earlier, and that too had a smaller budget than this. Technically had a smaller budget than this.
And Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus was done, I believe, 3 years earlier. No, 2 years earlier. And I believe you told me that film had a smaller budget too, but that film looked more expensive to me as well.
No, I think Spartacus wound up having a $12 million budget, which was. Yeah, it's $3 million more expensive than this.
Oh, is it?
I think I corrected myself because I was doing research before this on that. But I thought that this had a bigger budget than that. But it's so sad that a lot of it wasn't utilized because the 300 Spartans, you'd think that you'd be like, oh my god, the Persian army, let's make them look huge. And there are a few shots, don't get me wrong, that makes them look gargantuan. But, like, for example, the opening shot of the movie. There's thousands of extras used in that shot, and it was rather impressive, and it was a really wide shot from far away to just show off the number of extras they have. But I mean, that's really it. And the guy who was the director of photography on this movie, his name was, I can't pronounce his name, Geoffrey Unsworth. And anyways, he did the cinematography on films such as 2001: A Space Odyssey.
As well as the first two Superman films.
Yeah. And I'm like, really? I guess you got to start somewhere, but I mean, you have an experienced cinematographer like the director of this film, and they just didn't utilize. I feel like they just didn't utilize what they really could have done, and unfortunately, the film doesn't feel like an epic because of that.
Yeah, it feels more like, in terms of the way it's shot and directed, and so even in terms of the way it's acted, to be honest, it feels more like a low-budget production of the 300 Spartans as opposed to a big, grand-scale, expensive studio product. It doesn't show off the money that was put behind it, and it doesn't really feel like an epic. It doesn't in the way that it's shot, acted, or even written or paced for that matter. It feels like a second or third rate low budget film trying to tell this great grand story.
Yes, the only thing that I have to say that kind of process that we were talking about kind of worked to its advantage. I found the battle scenes in the third act of the film really well done, in my opinion. They were fast paced. The shots were very quick. And it felt a lot more personal because they moved the camera in so close.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of epics, whenever they have battle sequences, I can see why a lot of people don't like them because they tend to move a lot slower than normal battle scenes that we're used to. but I'm used to that because of the amount of extras and everything like that. For example, the big battle on El Cid, I think, is absolutely atrocious, and how it's shot and how it's done. It looks awful. But here, it really sells me that it really brought you in close and actually made me really enjoy how much energy the battle sequences had.
One thing that you'll probably hear me saying a lot throughout this review is that you'll probably hear me saying I like the second half a lot more than the first half. And that's because the second half is, well, it's not like Seven Samurai where it's almost non-stop action for a whole hour, but it's got several battle sequences that are pretty tightly spaced between each other with little breaks in between, but for the most part, it's more straightforward. Here's the battle sequences. Here's what's going on. And the first half is not. Let's put it like that. So, and I do agree. The battle sequences in the second half of the movie are pretty well done. The editing is just right, and there is a real sense of loss very often whenever somebody gets killed, whether it's a Spartan or a Persian. It really does feel very viscerally effective. So yeah, I do agree. The battle sequences in the second half of the movie are very effective, and they are shot in a way that's really visceral on screen.
Right, and I just want to say my favorite part about that is that final battle sequence when the Spartans, spoiler alert, they all die. And
yeah.
When they go charging into the Persian army because they know they're going to die, so they're like, fuck it. And they literally, that's their mentality, fuck it.
Yeah.
They charge into the Persian army. I was rooting for the Spartans at that scene. At that point, I was like, yeah, go kick some ass. And I do applaud the movie for making me feel that way. And again, Zulu gives off that same exact feeling as well. You're like rooting for the British on that film. You're like, yeah, kick some ass.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly because they're the underdogs here, the 300 Spartans, and you're just rooting for them.
Yeah.
And Leonidas leading that charge. And I personally felt that scene was beautifully shot as well. I love the formation of the triangle with Leonidas at the very center of it.
Yep, I agree with that.
And I think that was absolutely awesome. And that was missing from 300, the Zack Snyder movie. And I'm like,
now you are a history buff, and I'm interested in history, but I don't really study it as much depth as you do. But correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that historically it's been reported that the march on Thermopylae by Leonidas was more of a deliberate suicide mission as opposed to a grand battle to save Sparta. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and just like the Alamo, which I had just previously reviewed, this movie was more going for allegory than it was going for historical accuracy. This movie, like the Alamo, is nothing but a gigantic allegory for the Cold War. And watching it back and knowing the history and the time period that this movie was made, it clearly shows. Because the narrator specifically says, like, they are the last free nation in the world. Free. They keep talking about freedom. And I'm laughing because I'm like, Sparta most certainly was not for freedom. But, you know, and as soon as I found out that this was an allegory piece, I was like, oh god, there's going to be no historical accuracy to this film at all.
Yeah, and also you got, because the Spartans are talking about freedom throughout the whole film, and also the Persians are more about oppressing freedom. Well, the Persian king oppressing freedom and forming a slave army and so on and so forth. So
clearly,
yeah, it is.
The Persians is an allegory for communism. The allegory of the Soviet Union, more specifically, in the Warsaw Pact, while Greece uniting. Actually, that scene at the beginning of the film with that actor that we love so much, that scene was very much reminiscent of the NATO, which was when all the quote-unquote free states of Europe joined together to combat the Soviet Union. And it was very, very much so reminiscent of that. And even that message that, yes, we are all different, but we're fighting for the same cause here. We're fighting for Greece. Was very much present in this film, just like it was in reality when this movie was made.
Yeah, I didn't piece together the Cold War allegory until you mentioned it, but now looking back on the film, I do definitely see what you were talking about with that, and yeah, it does stand out as a really big, huge, basically a middle finger to the Soviet Union.
Right. Okay, another thing I just got to bring up. I felt like the locations on this film were beautiful. I love.
Well, whenever we got a nice wide shot to
whenever
observe
we got
them,
a
yes.
nice wide shot, yeah. What I found that was really cool was that they couldn't actually film this on Thermopylae, so they filmed it around Thermopylae, the real Thermopylae, because they couldn't shoot there because of, well, quite frankly, it was gone.
Yeah.
It's no longer there. But they shot near it, and it was also shot in Greece and everything like that. So I felt like that was a nice little touch that they were going for that level of authenticity, or trying to.
Yeah, and there are some very pretty shots that you get every now and then. There's some nice shots of the mountains, but unfortunately, they're just not, in my opinion, they're just not utilized well enough. I mean, yes, it's beautiful, but there's nothing really, no big grand money shots. Well, they're there, but just not enough of them to really make it really worth it, if you ask me.
Well, I agree to a certain extent. There are some shots of the Spartans near the water that I felt were really beautiful. I don't know why. I mean, I think the cinematography on this film overall is just really hit and miss.
Yeah, there is also a shot where a poorly directed but beautifully photographed shot where one of the characters is contemplating suicide by jumping off of a ravine,
Oh,
and
God.
that scene is not very well directed because, well, let's face it, you don't really realize that he was considering suicide until they reveal it in the dialogue.
Until they reveal it, yeah.
Because any other director would have insisted upon a shot looking down into the cavern, looking up at the character to realize that he's contemplating taking his own life. But as presented, he could just be like sightseeing for all we know, or looking for somebody. The way it's presented, it could be ambiguous. But my point is that that was one of those money shots where it really utilized, like, hey, this is beautiful, beautiful, rugged, virtually uninhabited country. And this makes me viscerally feel like we could actually be back in the real times of Thermopylae and the 300 Spartans.
Right. Oh, well, speaking of those characters, I want to talk about the absolutely pointless and stupid love story that is in this movie.
Yeah. The love story also doesn't even come full circle.
It's just so pointless. I'm like, why the fuck is it there? Anyways, it's between those two characters. And one of them's father is a traitor to Greece who joined Xerxes, which I was much more interested in that plot thread than I was in their love story. And again, I mentioned this to you, Patrick. I was like, and first off, this whole relationship between the son and the father is never resolved, which is too bad, because I felt like there's a scene where the Spartans kind of raid a little section of the Persian army to try to kill Xerxes, and they found out that he's not there, so they just kind of cause as much panic as possible just to give them another day.
Yep.
And during that scene, this character, who I forgot his name, but this character joins them, sneaks in with them and joins them, and actually saves the character. I thought it would have been so awesome, or so it could have not necessarily solidified or brought an end to this kind of story and made it, but it would have left me satisfied. Is what if they met at that raid? What if the father was there and the son was there, and like they dueled for a second until like the son succeeded or something? Like it would have brought an end to it. And to me, it would have been a relatively powerful, or it had the opportunity of being a very well done scene, but they just didn't take it. Instead, they focus on this stupid ass love story that is beyond pointless.
Yeah. Well, the biggest.
To be quite frankly, I think it was beyond silly.
Well, the biggest offense that the father-son dynamic goes is that they tease you with it for basically the first quarter of the movie.
First act of the film specifically, they really
it starts. You get that beginning thread in the first, basically after the first scene where the spy has been turned loose and he encounters the father, and the father says, "How is my son? How is he doing? Please give him a message." So they're hinting right at the very beginning. They're hitting from the very start, from the get-go. This is going to be a plot line that's going to develop and enhance as the story goes along. And then a little later on, when the son finds out what his father's been doing, that's kind of leading like, hey, it's gonna keep building and building. Eventually, they're going to meet each other, and they do eventually meet each other in the third act. And when they do, nothing happens.
Yeah, absolutely nothing is done of it. And that's, to me, the biggest sin of this movie, is that they kind of have all these plot threads that none of them really come together in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And, despite the cinematography, despite some of the really bad acting in this movie, despite, all this movie's flaws, I felt like that element there was the thing that really makes you go, about this film.
Yeah. In regards to the love story, I don't think I hated it as much as you. Because I was mostly just snoozing through it. I didn't find it totally objectionable. Like, I wasn't wishing death on them, but I didn't really care if they got together or got married or split up or whatever.
No, it never explains how far they actually got anyway. So it's like, I've forgotten. I'm like, okay, then what the fuck was the point of that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that goes back to the point that you were saying, and also what I was elaborating on with the father and the son and whatnot, is that the movie spends even more time with these two romantic interests, building upon them, showing, and there's even points where their relationship seems to change, going from happy to, the boy maybe wants to go die in battle, and the girl isn't sure what she wants to do with her future. And so the least the filmmakers could have done, if they were so obsessed with that particular dynamic, is give us a conclusion, a resolution at the very end of the movie, to show us what became of them at the very end. And they don't. They don't do that either.
No, they don't. It literally, the last shot is of Leonidas and the entire crew dead. And it says, they were remembered in history, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, the end title comes up. I'm like, what?
Yeah, we have no information what became of the two lovebirds, so to speak. We don't know what became of their future, how long their marriage lasted, so as a result...
Or even a scene maybe of, like, him trying to return to the 300, and he sees that they're all dead, and suddenly he sees that girl, and she comes up to him, and they just walk away. That would have been enough for me to be somewhat happy. And it would also kind of leave me like, okay, well, at least that's going, or at least that was kind of brought up, that they still love each other. But no, none of that is there. And another one that you brought up was the relationship between Leonidas and his wife.
Yeah.
Now, I never noticed this, but say what you said to me in chat.
Okay, well, this is just my personal perception, my personal vibe that I was getting while watching the film, is that the movie was kind of building up this kind of really intense romantic dynamic between, well, meant to be intense, I should say, meant to quote-unquote intense dynamic between Leonidas and his wife, there's a few scenes of them at the very beginning of the movie, and then in the second act, while the Spartans are at Thermopylae, there's a scene where the wife comes charging through the canyon to deliver a message. So that was kind of hinting to me like, oh, she's going to become part of the third act, or part of the narrative, so to speak. And that was it as far as her involvement in the story. So they were building her up through the first third of the movie and hinted at a further continuation of her involvement in the second act, and then we never saw or heard from her again, not even at the very end of the movie. That's just a vibe that I personally picked up from the film, but it was another case of what we were talking about, where it's building, and that's it.
Right, and again, that's the film's sin, is that it has all these kind of plot elements that are either hinted at or like shoved in your face that are just never resolved. And so that actually kind of leads me into King Xerxes, which I have to say, King Xerxes to me is what made this movie worth watching, really, because he gave the guy who played him, David Farrer, or however you pronounce his name, gave a genuinely great performance in this film. And
the character was pretty well written. Actually that character had that kind of good, epic movie kind of dialogue. The kind that was elaborate without being pretentious, that was lofty without being annoying.
Right.
It had that really stylistic kind of dialogue that I expect from an epic and a character in an epic. And I agree. His performance was a larger than life kind of performance.
Right.
That also look forward into this kind of film.
Right. We could see his ambitions even when he wasn't speaking. You can just look into his eyes and see how he wants to conquer the world and how he wants to continue with his ambitions. And to me, that's a sign of good acting or a good performance. Is when they could be saying nothing, they could just be staring into the camera and you know exactly what they're thinking. That is exactly what King Xerxes is here. And
frankly, I would have preferred the movie been about him, and to be honest.
Just because of his wonderful performance. And also,
that wouldn't have worked as far as their middle finger to the Soviet Union, but as far as personal enjoyment, it would have worked out a lot better.
It would have worked out a lot better. But Oh, I also like that general who worked with him for so long too. The one that was actually in charge of the killing the Spartans, and he kept
Yeah.
failing. I thought
Yeah.
his performance was pretty good too. He's the one that says our arrows will blot out the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I found his performance to be pretty decent as well. But
Yeah, they gave him some good dialogue, and the actor brought a good larger than life role as well. And and there was some attempt to actually make that character somewhat, I don't want to say relatable, but to make him stand out from the others.
right,
And yeah, I agree. Yeah. The enemies who you're supposed to be giving the thumbs down to are the most interesting people in the film,
they are. They really
and they have your rooting interest.
And this is actually one thing, because we were just talking about the love interest. I actually really liked Xerxes' relationship with that princess.
I think that they had some.
But
I think it could have been a lot better. I mean, I don't really. That's another case where they didn't really follow through with resolving
Exactly,
each of their future. But I think it's almost there for me. I mean, there's good moments, good. I like the whole thing of her being a lot smarter and sharper than all the other men in the room.
right.
Yeah, good moments, but I can't really say that I was swept away by it.
Yeah, and I have to say I like her in the third act of the film, though it wasn't completely resolved, because there's a scene where they're going off of the word of the slave, and they don't know whether to trust him or not. And throughout this entire thing, it's hinted at that she's kind of playing Xerxes, that she just wants power. But then the way how she looks at him in that scene, and the way how she reacts to him, to Xerxes reacting the way he is, her reaction to his reaction, it left me asking, was she really playing him, or did she actually wind up caring for him? And an example it is in that last scene, because she's begging Xerxes not to trust the Spartan scout that they captured, and she looks legitly concerned about King Xerxes' safety. Unfortunately, it's not confirmed whether or not she actually cared, or whether she was just playing or pulling a Kevin Spacey from House of Cards. We don't actually know. And again, that would have been so interesting. It was building up, and I was like, this is the one love kind of story that I was like, yeah, I want to know what the hell happens here.
Yeah.
But they don't pull through with it, and
No, they do not.
it is. It's such a letdown. Absolute such a letdown. Which then leads me to none other than King Leonidas.
Oh, boy.
Oh God.
Okay, I gotta ask this before we lead in. What did you think of Gerard Butler as King Leonidas in 300?
It was so over the top. It was good.
That's exactly my thoughts, and that's kind of what I was thinking. This performance either needed, or needed to have like a Charlton Heston-esque kind of actor who could bring a larger than life.
And I could tell that the actor was trying to do.
Oh yeah,
something with the role,
he was giving those kind of Charlton Heston like smirks and smiles. That's a Heston-ism.
Well, to me, he looked like King Leonidas, but he didn't act like King Leonidas. In my opinion,
he looked and he gave the right gestures, but he didn't really have that larger than life kind of verve to his performance that you would demand from this kind of role.
Right. Man, I wish he was dubbed over, because I felt that his voice was just so not fitting with his performance that he was giving, and I'd hear him speak, and I'm like, I can barely understand you.
Yeah.
And I can't tell, because I haven't seen anything else this man has played in.
Neither have I.
Come to think of it, a lot of the stuff that a lot of the people that worked on this, like the music composer, I've never heard anything else that he's done. So I have nothing else to compare it with. But, I haven't seen him in anything else, so I can't tell if he's a good actor or not, or if this is just the writing or the director. But,
yeah, he's been bad. I mean, he's got, according to IMDb, he was acting from late 40s to like the late 80s, so about a 40-50 year career there. And
well, obviously he was doing something
I can't say I've seen any of these movies that he's been in besides this one.
Right.
Some of the other actors I have seen in other films. Ralph Richardson, who played the politician.
Yes.
He played the father-in-law in Dr. Zhivago, one of our favorite films.
He did. Holy shit! I didn't know that.
Yep.
Ah, okay. That's why he looked familiar.
Yep. He was the father-in-law in that film, and I personally thought he did it. I thought he was all right in this movie, to be honest. I thought he gave a.
I wish the movie focused more on him than this stupid ass love story. You know?
He looked like he was actually having fun in this role.
Right.
Like he was taking all the dialogue and giving it a very Shakespearean kind of out there performance to it. I enjoyed his performance in the movie as well. And yeah, that would have been fascinating to see the politician's point of view, especially if it's going to be a semi-political movie.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, instead of focusing on the love story like epics, if you're just gonna fucking go with an allegory, focus on the politics of the situation. Pull an Alamo. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, push all that lovey-dovey bullshit to the side.
Yeah.
And let me see the politics. I want to know the politics of this because this sounds awesome. And they don't.
Yeah, there's a point in the movie where he said, I can't quote it verbatim, but it was like, one of these days I'm going to go to religion because there's more room for freedom there, or more room to say what you think, something like that.
Right.
And like that could have been a fascinating angle to keep going through. Why not cut back to him to show what's happening from the political side of things back in Athens and Sparta? Why keep cutting back to the love story and the people in the hills and King Leonidas, who is dull and bland and not very interesting? Why keep going back to them when we could go to the more interesting stuff, especially if it's going to be political?
Right. And, here's another thing that I think this movie actually has a leg up on 300. And I will say this, that I slightly like this movie better than 300, but that's just me. But one of the things that I think this movie has a leg up over 300 is the costumes. I love the costumes in this movie. And this movie doesn't feel like a gay pride parade, because they're actually wearing clothing.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, the Spartans are wearing actual Spartan uniforms, and I love that red. Oh
yeah,
my god, I love the Spartan red.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was also a thing that was incorrect about 300, about 300, the Zack Snyder film, was that is that in real life, one of the reasons why the Spartans had such a good military is because they actually had legitimate body armor, legitimate weapons.
Right.
And the Persians were mostly slaves fighting with whatever they had from home. Is that correct?
That is half correct. This film had actually, from what I know, pretty damn accurate uniforms. And I just to bring the point home, I love that color red. I mean, right when I see them, I'm like, yeah, these are the Spartans. Just laying eyes on those uniforms. It's kind of like how I know that the real Roman legion really didn't have the over-the-top red capes. But if I was to ever make an epic about ancient Rome, I would have them have that over-the-top red cape, because I'm like, that screams Rome to me.
Yeah.
This screams the Spartans to me. Maybe the uniforms wouldn't look quite as neat as they do in this movie. Actually, I guarantee it. But it's still, I look at them and I'm like, yeah, this is Sparta.
Yeah, and I do kind of like that little angle where, where the young man gets his cape and shield taken away from him, and he feels a real sense of loss, with the cape symbolizing, what his identity really means.
Right.
And that would have been fascinating to also have more details on, or follow up further on down the story. But yeah, another case of they build and hint at it and don't do anything with it. Right.
The last thing that I really want to talk about is the music score by Manos Hadjiakadis, however you pronounce his last name. Derka.
Yeah.
The music score for this film is very, very rousing.
It is.
Especially the Spartan theme. The Spartan theme, it makes me go, that's badass. It doesn't make me go, this is epic. It makes me go, this is badass.
Yeah. Parts of it actually kept reminding me of Elmer Bernstein's score from the remake of The Ten Commandments. When they're marching out of Egypt, I just kept hearing a similar vibe that was like, that almost sounds like a few notes from the Exodus scene from Ten Commandments. But yeah, I thought it was an effective score too.
I could see that. Yeah. But I thought it was an effective score because it made me go, fuck yeah, when the Spartans were charging into the Persian army at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's when I know a score is really good. It makes me go, fuck yeah! And it makes me root for them. It's like, again, the score for Zulu. The score for Zulu isn't big. It's just very rousing and makes you root for the people you're supposed to be rooting for. And I think in that case, the music score definitely soared in that area.
I suppose we should probably put out a little bit of a slightly untrue vibe that's going on, which is probably people are thinking we probably hate and despise this movie to death. I don't hate and despise this movie. In fact, if somebody were to ask me, Patrick, should I see this movie? I would actually say yes.
Me too. I would say yes. Go ahead and watch it. It's a fun movie.
Yeah, I would say see it once, so you can say you've seen it, and see it especially for the second half of the movie, for those battle scenes.
Right.
But it's not a film that I would encourage you to look back on and think of and contemplate throughout the years. And so yeah, I think actually it's a marginal success as a film.
This movie was a huge hit when it came out. I know that. Like it only cost $9 million. Well, it only cost $9 million, was a pretty penny back then, in case you haven't noticed. But it made It made in 1962 and 63 alone, it made $76 million.
Yeah, well, evidently people saw something they liked about it, so
yeah,
I really liked about it.
I know. If I saw the trailer, I'd be like, I want to see this in theaters. I know. I'd say that. I'm like, I want to see this in movie theaters. So. If I saw
and back in those days, epics were, a much more commercially viable genre than they are now.
Right? Yeah, because this was basically in the heyday of the.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because like we said, we had films like Spartacus and Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia. Films like that were being made around the same general few years. So
right,
and pretty much all those were big box office hits when they first came out. So it had that going for it as well. The timing, the circumstances. Definitely played into its favor.
Right. So, I guess that just kind of covered our final thoughts of the movie right there, because...
Yeah.
And I just want to drive the point home, too. I don't hate this movie. In fact, what I liked about it, I really liked about it. The battle scenes, Xerxes, the music, they're wonderful. And I found it very, very entertaining. To say the least, I was at least entertained by this movie. And I was happy to say, yeah, I watched it. Now, part of me also says that because I've been wanting to watch this movie forever, and suddenly I see it, and I'm like, yes. And so I instantly clicked it. Oh,
yeah.
God. Absolutely. It's at least fun. The last half of the film is at least fun.
Yeah. And there are some golden moments in it, without question. And there are some golden story elements throughout it as well, but... On the whole, it is a very, very, very mixed bag.
It is. It's a very, very mixed bag. So, what rating would you give this movie, Patrick?
I would say on a scale of 0 to 5, I'd probably give it like a 3 out of 5, a solid 3 out of 5. Basically saying, there's some good stuff in here, but don't expect to see a grand masterpiece or even a solid movie out of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say... I was expecting something more from this film. I was expecting something bigger, but it didn't really deliver on that. But, I still had fun with it. So, I rate from 1 to 4, and I was going to give this movie a 2.5 out of 4 stars. And I'm going to keep with that rating, the 2.5 out of 4 stars. So, pretty okay. pretty okay. A thumb
mixed
in the
bag.
middle. Yeah. No thumb up, no thumb down, a thumb in the middle. So.
And now the balcony is closed. See you later.
See you later. You have anything to pimp out, Patrick, or?
Yeah, sure. Might as well mention that if you haven't already, go to my channel, The Unknown 837, and watch my retrospective on the Jurassic Park franchise. With my co-host, I reviewed the 3 Jurassic Park films, looked on its impact on modern culture, reviewed some of the video games, and expressed my thoughts on the upcoming Jurassic World based on what we know about it so far. And there's a whole bunch of stop-motion stuff for you to watch, so check it out and subscribe while you're there.
Yeah, do like and check out the new trailer on the new Sons of Cerzera episode for my new movie, Which Way They Walk. Like us on Facebook at AN Productions. Subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell us your opinion if you've seen it, or just drop a comment telling us how awesome we are or how terrible we are. We don't really care at this point. Do check out the Godzilla Saga on both Facebook and YouTube. It has its own separate YouTube page now. And that's really it.
That was 300 Spartans.
Right. That was 300 Spartans, everybody. So, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying sayonara.